What's up, guys? It's Pastor Jordan here, and welcome back to another online Ignite experience. Hey, look, with that said, we're on part 2 of our sermon series, Choices. And so last week we talked about tough choices. Come on, how many guys are facing some tough choices right now? Some of that could be school, could be friendships, could be family situations. It could be, what am I gonna buy off of the Steam store or the Minecraft server, or who knows? Tough choices, people. But with that said, last week's response or the takeaway was we gotta use the fruit of the Spirit as our metric to see what choice we should make. If we're making a choice, does it give us peace? If we make a choice, is it gonna give us joy? Right? That's a great way to look at how to make the right decision for tough choices. So today, we wanna talk about the reality of choices. The reality of choices. We're gonna talk about what happens when maybe some of us, we've made a bad choice. Maybe some of us, we haven't made a bad choice, but what happens if we make a bad choice? Some of us, we what to do when there's people around us that make bad choices, right? So that's what we're gonna talk about today. You know, talking about choices in life, I want you guys to know that I haven't been the most perfect pastor in the world. I'll be really honest with you guys. I wish I could sit here and say, yeah, I'm perfect. I'm the best. But you know what's interesting is when I actually started following Jesus at the age of 18, you know, I was still, I was like what you would normally just say, a teenager, just like everyone, where I was one of those guys that, as much as I hated drama, I was one of those guys that as soon as there was kind of some type of drama, because I was still insecure about myself and I still wasn't sure about how people thought of me, I would sometimes use rumors or something, or people, if someone was dating or if someone was doing something weird, I would kind of use those rumors just to start conversations so I could be a part of them. And so I remember when I was 18, you know, I started going to this one youth group, and there's this one guy and this one girl that were really, they seemed really close with each other, but I don't think they were dating yet. And so I remember I was kind of this outside guy coming in, and as I saw them, and I was close friends with kind of their other friend group here, and this is the guy and the girl that were kind of interested, and here's me. You know, I just started coming to this church, and so I think out of my insecurity, I wanted to be liked. And so I remember what happened is I started saying to all these guys, ooh, like, you know what, I think this one guy and this one girl, I think they like each other. I think they're dating. I think we should, ooh, like, what do you guys think? What do you guys think? And I kind of started this little rumor trail that started circulating between these group of friends that started to make this one guy and this one girl start to get close with each other. And for me, you know, it started off as what I thought was harmless, pushing for maybe a romance or something. But it turns out that these one guy and this one girl, they didn't like each other at all. But when everyone kept pressuring them to, hey, you know, some people have been saying you guys like each other. Ooh, people are saying that, like, you guys have been talking to each other. My small little rumor had spread into from one person's ear, and it became like that game Telephone. I don't know if you guys have heard of that game. Telephone, it's that game where you whisper something to one person's ear, and by the time it gets to the end of the line, whatever you whispered could have changed. And so that's how my rumor became, or what happened to my rumor. My rumor went from, hey, what if, I think they're dating, maybe something's happening, to like, hey, I think you guys are talking to each other behind the scenes, and what are the chats, and I think I saw you guys at the mall together. It created this wildfire of rumors that I didn't even intend. But because I made this choice to start or spread this small rumor that exploded into something else, what actually ended up happening is the guy and the girl started feeling like, wow, they did not feel welcome in the youth group anymore. They started feeling like, man, like, I don't like these rumors being spread about us. And actually, one of the guys, he stopped coming to the youth ministry for a while. It was actually kind of sad. And when I look back at that, I think, man, I made a poor choice. I made a horrible choice. And for me, you know, that was a moment that I thought, there's no one to blame but myself. Now, I don't know about you guys, maybe you guys have been in a situation where maybe you faced a choice that you regret. Maybe it was a bad choice or maybe not the best choice. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when bad choices happen or bad things happen to us, we can enter into a place where we say, oh man, well, what did I do? What could I have done? Or sometimes we can fall in a place where we want to blame God and say, God, how could you let this happen? God, why this? Why that? Now, see, the honest truth is when it comes to choices, that's the whole point of having free will. The truth is that if God designed us to be robots, then there would be no room for us to choose him and for God to want to continually choose us. Because if we're just robots, God doesn't even choose us. He designed us to choose him, But God created us to have this thing called free will. Now, the issue with free will is that means we can also choose broken choices. And because of that, we live in a broken world. And so, with our broken choices, a lot of times, whether people do broken things to us or we do broken things to ourselves, we have to face the reality of our choices. In fact, that's the main point, or that's the main idea of today's topic, is the reality of choices. The reality of the choices we make. And what do we do when bad choices have been made? What are the action steps that we go through? I want to walk us through this story in the Bible here of a guy that a lot of you guys know named King David. See, a lot of us will look at King David as a glorious king that killed Goliath and rose up to power and brought the nation of Israel to great prominence and really rose it up out of the ashes of its slavery and the times that it was dominated by other nations. But I want to read actually a time where King David, he actually made some poor choices. And a lot of us in here, the reality is when we come into situations that we've made poor choices, we can't sit and say, well, is this God's fault? God, how can you let this happen? We have to analyze and say, is any of this my fault? How can I own my choices and what can I do after? So check this out. This is what it says in 2 Samuel chapter 11. And we're going to start from verse number 1. Okay, 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse number 1. And so it says, in the spring of the year, when the kings normally go out to war, King David sent Joab and the Israelite army to fight the Ammonites. They destroyed the Ammonite army and laid siege to the city of Rabbah. However, David stayed behind in Jerusalem. Late one afternoon, after his midday rest, David got out of bed and was walking on the roof of the palace. Remember, David should have been at war. David should have been preoccupied by something, preoccupied with his purpose, preoccupied with vision. Sometimes, I don't know about you guys, when there's those times that we kind of aren't preoccupied with vision, we're not preoccupied with purpose, we're not dreaming big, we're not doing something big, those are usually the moments that we tend to fall back into doing poor choices. So it says this. It says, David got out of bed and was walking on the roof of the palace. As he looked out over the city, he noticed a woman of unusual beauty taking a bath. He sent someone to find out who she was. And he was told she is Bathsheba. It's funny, she was taking a bath, and her name is Bathsheba. The daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Then David sent messengers to her, and when she came to the palace, he slept with her. She had just completed the purification rites after having her menstrual period. Then she returned home. See, it's almost like he just was so caught in the moment of what he wanted. He didn't catch the moment where the people said, she's the daughter of Eliam, but more than that, she is the wife of Uriah. See, we have King David, the guy that says, God's going to lead us. God's going to guide us. God's going to do something incredible. And somehow, out of his own desires to want to get this woman that he thinks he really wants, he kind of misses something that not only is this another man's wife, he also has wives. And he's entering into a moment where he's making a poor decision. So here we go. Verse 5 says, later when Bathsheba discovered that she was pregnant, she sent David a message saying, I'm pregnant. So what happens after this is, after David finds out that Bathsheba gets pregnant, he starts freaking out because he realizes what he's done. Come on, how many of you guys know that when we make poor choices, we don't realize it in the moment because something happens in our brain where when our emotions are shooting off and the chemicals in our brain are going off, the frontal part of our lobe here shuts off. And so instead of thinking logically and rationally, we think emotionally. We think out of what our desires want. That's why it's hard for people to want to beat addictions. It's hard for people to make right choices in moments where their adrenaline is going because that part of the decision shuts off, and so they need to reactivate that. But when we don't do that, we end up making poor choices. And so as David realized the poor choice that he made and the ramifications that come of it, you know what happened is instead of trying to come clean about it, he does what everyone does when they make a poor choice. They feel ashamed and they try to cover up. And so what ends up happening is David says, well, what can I do to get rid of the evidence? So he tries to get Uriah. So he tries to hang out with Uriah. He tries to do different things like, hey, Uriah, I want you to come with me. Get away from the front line. Come with me. I want you to hang out with me. So what happens is David starts to want to build this relationship with Uriah, and he says, hey, you know what, let's maybe if there's a way I can get rid of Uriah without anyone knowing, I'll try to do that. So David tries to pull Uriah away from his men. Then David tries to get Uriah drunk and get him to forget about stuff and to sleep with his wife. And David comes up with all these different plans to try to get Uriah, but Uriah is so full of integrity and he doesn't want to leave his men behind. So David, from all of his trying to cover up of his poor choices, he keeps running up empty until David hits this moment where he thinks, you know what, maybe my only choice is to try to kill Uriah. But not only kill him, he finally has his plan, and this is the plan. The plan to kill Uriah is to send Uriah to the front line with his men, but then as soon as they're at the front line, what the plan is he's going to send them out to the front, and then as soon as the enemies come, everyone's going to pull back and retreat except for him. That's so messed up. That's crazy. And it's almost crazy. I mean, this is going to be another sermon series at another time, but it's crazy how shame will make you do crazy stuff. When you feel ashamed of yourself, you'll tend to follow the stream of poor choices, right? It's so sad. But as we see here in this moment, David made some poor choices where he sent Uriah out. The army retreated as soon as the enemy came. And then after that, Uriah is dead. And this is where we pick up at verse 22. In chapter 11, still in 2 Samuel. It says, so the messenger went to Jerusalem and gave a complete report to David. The enemy came out against us in the open fields, he said, and as we chased them back to the city gate, the archers on the wall shot arrows at us. Some of the king's men were killed, including Uriah the Hittite. Well, tell Joab not to be discouraged, David said. The sword devours this one today and that one tomorrow. Fight harder next time and conquer the city. Look at David trying to put on the mask. When Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. When the period of mourning was over, David sent for her and brought her to the palace, and she became one of his wives. Then she gave birth to the son, but the Lord was displeased with what David had done. See, after this moment had happened, then comes the prophet Nathan that had been with David, and Nathan comes in and he rebukes David. He says, David, do you know what you've done? And after this moment, David, he finally comes clean and he finally opens up and realizes the poor choice he's made. Now, see, for a lot of us, when we read this story, this sounds pretty extreme. It sounds like a pretty extreme bad choice. But see, in this moment, what we have to realize is that David had no one to blame but himself. David had no one to point the finger at but himself. See, it wasn't God that put Bathsheba there. It wasn't God that told David to kill Uriah. It wasn't God that told David to look at Bathsheba. It was all just David's doing because it was David's choice. And so the reality of David's choice, of the choices that David made, was that it led to someone getting killed and him covering up and now having a baby with a woman that wasn't even his wife, it was someone else's wife. That's the reality of choices. And see, for us, that might sound like an extreme thing, but for us, some of us, we have a reality of choices too. If you guys don't apply yourself in school and you get poor grades, is that your fault? Is that God's fault? Is that your parents' fault? Or whose fault is that? If you guys are choosing to watch YouTube and play video games over doing the hard work or helping around home or doing the things you're supposed to do, is that your fault? Is it your parents' fault? Is it God's fault? Whose fault is it? And see, no matter what, we have choices that we have to make every day, but what the choices that we make today is going to determine the future that we have tomorrow, going to determine the present that we decide today. And so that's the reality of our choices. Now, when we look at David's life, after this choice that he made out of his poor choices, after he has the woman, he starts to enter this mode where he realizes he has to come clean. In fact, some of you guys, as you're reading this, David enters this moment where he feels like from here, it feels like he starts to backslide a bit, where he feels like his kingdom is getting out of hand. And if you've ever read, if you want to do this is a side homework, you could read Psalm chapter 51. I think it's Psalm chapter 51. And if you want to read that psalm, that's a critical psalm that comes at a time where David feels like his life starts crumbling apart because of his poor choice. And when he feels like his life is crumbling apart, he feels like God isn't there. But the reality is that God was there, but David had to deal with his choices. The outcome of David's life later was, check this out here in chapter 12 of 2 Samuel. See, Bathsheba, the woman that he slept with, she gave birth to a son named King Solomon. That's in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 24. It says, David comforted Bathsheba, his wife, slept with her, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son, David, and named him Solomon. And the Lord loved the child. And see, it's actually later that Solomon became the next king after David, that after David's kingdom crumbled, Solomon re-brought it back up. And not only that, Jesus came out of the line of, from David to Solomon, Jesus came after that. And so what that shows us here is that even when we make poor choices and we have to deal with the reality of those choices, right? David's kingdom still started to crumble before him, before it picked back up, right? In the reality of all those choices, then what happens is God can still come in and redeem those things afterwards. It doesn't mean God abandons us. It still means we need to deal with our choices, but God still has a way of saying, look, we can get through this. Now, check this out. I'm going to get ready to close here, but this is in Romans chapter 8, verse 28. I love this verse here. But check this out. This is what it says. It's one of my favorite verses. We know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. So for us, when we're having to deal with poor choices, or maybe we've had poor choices in the past that are biting us in the butt now, what you have to think about is, okay, what is God wanting to teach me now, and how can I use this for my future? That should be our response. When you guys have made some poor choices or some bad choices, whether it's me, whether it's David, or all of this, we have to think here that question. What is God trying to teach me now, and how can I use it for my future? When you look at Romans 8:28, it says that God causes everything to work together for the good. When I realized that my drama caused all this gossiping and backbiting for my friend, then for the guys that I knew from my old youth group, after that, I was like, man, I am going to try to do my best to make sure I never let drama stop people from coming to know Jesus. Ever since that moment, I've tried to use it as a teaching moment that stuck with me from 18 till now. So I'm telling you, that's your only takeaway when you guys have had some poor choices. Don't give up hope. God is with you. He'll still redeem you, just like David. David, after his poor choice, in a series of poor choices, his kingdom that he built up from following Jesus started to crumble. But then God redeemed it by saying, hey, all this stuff that might not have worked out, I'm going to now bring Solomon to bring it back up and redeem the line through Jesus. But now with us, we have to think, God can make your situation work out for good. You just have to ask, well, God, what are you trying to teach me? And how can I use this for my future? So let's pray. Jesus, thank you so much just for the times that you've been with us. God, we know that we've gone through some things in the past. Maybe some people have made tough or poor choices towards us and we have to deal with it. God, maybe we've made some tough choices and we have to deal with it. In the midst of all of that, God, we know that we want to trust you. God, we want to learn from what you want to teach us, and we want to apply it to our future so that we can grow and help others along the way. So God, we thank you for this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in to another message for our part 2 of our Choices series. Now, remember, check out the caption below, or the comment section below, and that's where you can get our small group questions. And I can't wait to see you guys in the tribe discussions. We'll see you there.